diferents ponents ens han posat de manifest alguns aspectes molt interessants que van estrictament més enllà del debat financer o basat molt en aspectes monetaristes, i hem vist des de diferents perspectives moltes relacions vinculades amb el debat polític, amb la fortalesa dels governs, amb els aspectes demogràfics, de migració. És a dir, un aspecte molt interessant que m'ha semblat, i suposo que sortirà amb alguna de les preguntes o amb el debat, és com els factors de fortalesa o les característiques dels estats poden ajudar-nos a explicar o fins i tot a preveure l'evolució futura que poden tenir, sense perdre de vista aquesta dimensió no només econòmica o financera, sinó també demogràfica, política, social, etc. Sense més intervenció per part meva, si hi ha preguntes des de la sala, podem...
Philip Ammerman from Navigator Consulting Group. I was really impressed by the presentation for Latvia, and I have a question if you can see a difference between the IMF or the structural adjustment policies followed there or what I showed about Greece yesterday. In Greece, we have a 5-year adjustment program of the deficit where it's supposed to fall from 8.2% down to 2%. And I'm just wondering, if you are planning a structural adjustment, is it better to do, and you know you've got to return to the markets because you need external borrowing, is it better to do this quickly, as in Latvia, or slowly, as in Greece? And also, I think in both countries we see a real misinterpretation of some events by major commentators or journalists who probably know very little about the country and who probably have never even visited it. I'm wondering if you can comment on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I said that I'm in favor of that you try to do this fast. I mean, why prolong the pain, right? It's like going to the dentist. I mean, don't wait till next week if it hurts today, right? And I'm more concerned with, for instance, with Greece this year. You outlined, about 1 zillion problems yesterday. Can it really be done? Because I can see in Latvia that, yes, this was tough. But as also Raul pointed out, we could do it without unrest, partly because we don't have trade unions, but also because many people there, they still remember the transition back in '91. And that's, when the countries were really, really poor. And that's where perhaps, Western Europeans, they don't remember the war anymore and so on. That's too far long ago, right? But in the Baltics, you still remember what real poverty was. What's going on right now is, relative to that, is nothing much, actually. So therefore, I'm getting sometimes be a little bit concerned about, can this really be done in some of the other countries? And certainly the lessons from us it's very, very tough. But it seems that it was a good idea simply to go ahead as fast as possible. And also, just the last thing, many of the figures, actually, they look better now for Latvia, even though the whole thing is very precarious still, look much better than it did in the original IMF report, where they, for instance, predicted that debt to GDP could go to 89%. It seems that it'll stabilize at only about 40, which is good, actually, right? So, in this case, pedal to the metal, right? And go.
Can I just ask you a question, Morten, incidentally? I mean, about doing it quickly or doing it slowly. Do you think there's a cultural difference here, not East and West, between North Europe and South Europe?
Yes, but actually more sort of a little bit East-West. Let's put it like this and say, if there's some country that really can do things like that, then it's not so much Latvians, that's the Estonians, right? If you look at Estonian economic policy, you find a country that is unlike most other countries. Everything there seems to be very rules-based. Currency board first, but also this here about that, if not the law, then certainly idea budget deficits, no, right? Also resulting in the lowest government debt of any country in the European Union. And that's, I must admit, I have always admired that with Estonians, or also, as Raul pointed out, when they became independent again, they chose to have 0 tariffs. I mean, they only had basically to introduce tariffs when they joined the European Union. Besides that, gung-ho free market liberalism and so on. So it's a little bit like more East-West, actually, than North-South. So let's say North and East, perhaps. Oh, that gets tricky. Sorry about that.
Yeah, just one thing, perhaps, which was not stress. This is more like political issue, but I think yesterday it was mentioned as well that in Greece you can have a kind of more post-socialist economy compared to its real post-socialist countries. And I think these kind of left-right views, in some reasons, and I really don't know exactly why, in Estonia we don't have really strong left-wing political forces. I mean, in many other Eastern European countries, former communist parties transferred to some kind of whatever, social democrats, or they still are communist parties, and they play influential role in economic policy and all these fiscal issues. In Estonia, we have central parties and right-wing parties, and that could be part of the explanation, I guess.
Just, first of all, I want to agree with Philip. There's not an expression that in the revolution the first people you shoot are the lawyers. In fact, the first people you should shoot are the economists, and the second people are the lawyers. I agree with you in particular. I believe that international economic commentators, particularly Krugman, I think he's a smart ass who has never had to make a decision in his life, so it's great that he can sit on the fence and comment in a smart aleck way about everybody else's decisions. That applies to an awful lot of people who actually are involved in economics at an academic level as opposed to economics at a political level. We've discussed a couple of points. One of them was the cultural issue. For example, Ireland is interesting too, where we have very, very high levels of trade union activity, very high levels of trade union membership, not as high as it was in the past, but yet you have an acceptance that you're not going to solve the problems by going on the streets. So I think we need to look at this cultural issue in the way we handle the crisis. But the real question I had to ask is this. We've been talking about 2 Ds. We've been talking about devaluation, and we've been talking about deficits. But we haven't been talking about another D, and that's default. I fully appreciate the decisions that were made in Latvia, because I remember talking to Latvian government members at the time and how upset they were at the hemorrhage of young people going to places like Ireland or London or wherever to make a living, and they felt that this was a stain on their national character. One of the problems that I see in the Baltics, and I see it in my own country now, is this massive influx of money through the banking system. Builders didn't just wake up one morning and say, we'll build thousands of houses, or we'll build lots of offices, or we'll get involved in lots of speculative activity. They did that for 2 reasons. First of all, because they perceived that demand was there, and second, the means was there. The means was the fact that countries that had surpluses flooded their money through the banking system right across Europe. It happens in Greece, it happened in Spain, it happened in Ireland. The question I have is this: why is it that the workers, the taxpayers, the ordinary citizens have had to bear the costs of the activity and the profligacy of the banking system? Why is it that we aren't actually talking about the people who have made ridiculous amounts of money, capital available for ridiculous speculation, pay the price? And I make this point. In the negotiations that we went through last November, we were forced in Ireland to deal with the IMF and the EU to save the banking system in a number of other countries. It is a fact that the IMF, oddly enough, were far more willing to contemplate putting some pain on the banking systems in the countries that are regarded as the best countries in Europe in order to meet some of the costs of their decisions. So why is it that we never actually discuss that? Unilateral default, I accept, for an individual country would be very, very foolhardy because you would pay a cost in the long term. Devaluation in the case of, as Edward is saying, in the case of Latvia where the borrowings were in euro, was really going to simply it wasn't going to change much on the debt side. But why is it that it is unpopular to discuss the default option? It seems to me that ordinary citizens who don't actually make the decisions pay the price, but senior bankers who do make the decisions walk away scot-free. And that's true in every one of the cases that you look at. In Spain, young people are paying the cost, 45% unemployment. Same in my own country, same in Greece. Why is it that one sector, one group in this particular drama always escape? And why is it that we haven't dealt with that? Thank you. But the presentations, I must say, I enjoyed greatly. Thank you.
I can briefly comment. As I 100% agree with you, and actually in the last slide I was pointing out the same issue, that we are, what solidarity means here. We are not supporting countries, we are supporting banking system actually. And I think one reason is that banking sector lobby in Europe is so strong that, you know, they're stronger than the country's lobbies perhaps sometimes. That's my explanation of
that. Basically, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe Raul has given some indication. I'm not a politician, I'm an economist, and I mean, I think it's actually a political question, you know, why this is like this.
Una pregunta més? Tenim uns minuts encara. Jo potser adreçaria una pregunta general a tota la taula. És en termes de sostenibilitat, d'una de les preguntes que treia l'Edward a part de la seva presentació. És a dir, s'estan fent les reformes necessàries perquè la propera crisi, si n'hi ha o quan vingui, trobi fonaments més sòlids a les economies dels països bàltics per fer-hi front, sobretot en termes també no només financers o econòmics, sinó socials i polítics?
Well, I hate to get questions where, you know, my first instinct is to say, I don't know, right? So I'm not sure I can come up with a good one, but yeah, perhaps I tried to indicate here, yeah, Latvia is sort of out of the tunnel, but what people always say about this tunnel is that when you're out of it, then everything is okay, but who says so? Perhaps it's raining out there or something like that. Okay, poor metaphor and so on. Latvia is still walking on some sort of tightrope, and it's still very precarious what's going to happen in the future. Some of the data here that was shown by Ed about the demographics, it's very bleak. I mean, the population there will shrink very, very much in the years to come. Basically, the number of children that we have had for the past 20 years is just half of what it used to be back in Soviet times. So you'll have this age dependency ratio really, really change. Right? There'll be very few taxpayers to take care of the pensioners in the future. It'll be very, very tricky for a country that likes to be sort of relatively low tax and still to try to afford for all these pensions. There's a lot of challenges ahead. I mean, this is sort of small potatoes, basically. So I wouldn't say that we're looking forward to, I'm certainly not looking forward to the next crisis, but there are tons of economic problems ahead, and many of them really are demographic related, no doubt about that.
I think this demographic issues is very important, and Estonia has managed to stop the decline. At least last year, we had first time for I don't know, over many years, we have a positive birth rate in Estonia, and partly it was related to the social issues, social support, so-called mothers' wages and stuff like that, so that you can stay home and get 1.5 years your full salary what you earned before. So these kind of measures were implemented. And the second issue, which was not discussed here, is educational issues. And I think the Baltic countries are in rather good shape in this sense. And if we look at the share of the people with third level, that means university level education, we are quite well prepared for the future. And if what I really hope during this crisis, the restructuring started in a way that firms, they simply can't continue in the same way as it did before the crisis, then I am optimistic in this sense that we are moving ahead with more or less towards a Scandinavian level of economic development, and I see the light in the tunnel. So, okay, perhaps because I'm from Estonia, I don't know. But and the second aspect, if we think about future, is again, is particularly Estonian issue that 75% of our export makes 75% of GDP in Estonia. So we are extremely vulnerable from the outside world. And actually, it is perhaps even not correct to ask how we will do in the future. It's better to ask how Swedes and Finns are doing in the future. If these economies are doing well, and it seems to me that they are doing well, then I think the Baltic countries are doing well as well, because we have very, very strong economic links to Scandinavian countries. So this is, I think, our hope. Because whatever reforms we implement in a country, and this balanced budget and all these, okay, I'm lowering some taxes and what they want to do. But if external situation is very bad, this will not help anyway. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, perhaps I'd finish off this one with a more general thing, going back to the point about making the changes quickly or making the changes more slowly. I mean, as I was making clear during the presentation, I mean, I am worried about, you know, the fragility of many of the economies around the European periphery. I never use this expression for Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain for the obvious reason. I think it's a bit disrespectful. I mean, I tend to see things in terms of the peripheral economy. Some people even ask me whether the United Kingdom could now be considered a peripheral economy, and in fact there are some good and well-founded arguments to say maybe it is. So we have a periphery that goes all the way around from the UK through Ireland up to through Hungary and Greece to the Baltics, you know, and I think a lot of the economies on the periphery, and yeah, the UK would certainly still be one of them, that are very, very, very fragile. You know, and it's not obvious how we're going to handle, you know, the next time. We're not talking about financial crisis like the one we've just seen. Maybe we'll never see that again. Or maybe we won't, you know. But I mean, I'm just talking about garden variety, simple slowdowns and recessions and de tota la vida, as we say in Catalan. No? So that's going to happen. But here in Catalonia, in this moment, you know, I think a lot of people look, you know, but there's a lot of interest, in fact, in the Baltic countries, precisely because of your trajectory from being inside the old, back in the USSR, to the small, modern, independent countries. And one of the first things that you could notice is, you know, this is not an easy process. I mean, you had a few good years and then a huge problem on top of you. So, I mean, some of the kind of naive people often ask me, you know, would Catalonia be sustainable as an independent country? Yeah, I'm absolutely convinced. I mean, in fact, Ken Rogoff, by accident, said the other day in an interview with a Spanish publication that Catalonia on its own would be one of the richest countries in the world. I mean, but the problem is, as we can see, none of this is plain sailing one way or the other. And one important lesson, I think, that for the debate we're having here now in Catalonia about, we're faced with a situation that we don't like, you know. We don't control our own money to the extent that we'd like to be able to control it. We've been told we've got to have a 1.3% deficit, and if we don't work to that objective, it's quite possible that Spain would have to go into rescue, and that the euro could have problems, you know. And I think if we're serious here, we have to take that very seriously, and in fact learn something from our colleagues here about, if we've got to do something, it's better just to do it. You know, why do you have to do it? Because then the people who you depend on to get financing actually may be prepared to finance you. I mean, one of the great advantages, interest rates in Estonia, obviously, but with the euro entry have come down. But Latvia has got. I mean, the Latvian government is hoping to launch at some point in the near future a euro-denominated bond, which the Generalitat of Catalonia couldn't do. Simply because nobody will buy it, you know. So I mean, there are you know, making the adjustment is painful, I mean, sometimes you have to stand the pain if you've got another objective that you're actually working towards. Okay, thank you.
Molt bé, doncs donarem aquí acabada aquesta sessió, agraint als ponents les seves intervencions, el debat, tornar a recordar els agraïments a la Stockholm School of Economics in Riga, també a les institucions d'aquí de la UOC i de la Fundació CatDem. I ara recordar-vos que fem la pausa de cafè aquí baix al hall de l'edifici i cada 2:45 tornarem a continuar la sessió d'avui amb el cas de Finlàndia. Gràcies a tots i fins després.